INFPs can shine so brightly if they understand this one thing. I can guarantee you, if you're an INFP watching this, and you can stick through the entirety of this video, it might take 2 parts, but I have a feeling I'm going to be able to capture it all in one. If you can stick through the entirety of this, this will be a game changer for you. And it certainly has been for me. All I ask is that you close the other browser tabs, put your phone on silent, whatever you need to do. Just give yourself permission to turn off all the distractions and tune into what I'm saying here. Now, worst case scenario, you've lost however many, 20 or so minutes. Best case scenario, you get something that, like I said, could be an absolute game changer. So let's get into it. As a base for what I'm saying here, I want to give an example of one of my favorite musicians, who I believe to be an INFP, and that is the Japanese singer-songwriter, the folk singer-songwriter Ichiko Aoba. If you've never heard her music before, I highly recommend checking it out. It's just, I don't really know how to do justice to it in words, but it touches on certain themes with the sounds, just the composition she uses, touches on certain emotional themes that are so rich and so vivid. It's I can't wait to go see her live, right? She's not coming to Melbourne this year, but her music has really touched me and impacted me in a deep way. The YouTube algorithm noticed that, and I saw a video that was made recently by quite a popular music channel about her life, and immediately I clicked on it. I was like, wow, yeah, I definitely want to learn more about this girl's life. And they were talking in the video about how she never set out to actually be a famous musician. She really just actually was someone who was dealing with a lot of loneliness and despair in herself, was struggling a lot. And the music, from what I could garner from this video, was sort of a container for her. It was a form of expression. And the way that came together was that she eventually got a manager and started playing for small groups, and then it grew and it grew and it grew until now she's got kind of a cult following. And, you know, I'm talking to you about her now, obviously. So it's grown and it's grown and it's grown. She never set out to make her imprint on the world initially. Actually, she spent so much time drawing in, from what I could garner from that video, and figuring out where she was in herself. And the music was really a way of putting that feeling and that emotion into form somehow, giving it some kind of expression. And that's really where she found her muse, right? Her muse was these existential states that she was going through in herself, and then informing that into a kind of art, into an art form like music, began to impact other people. And hopefully you can see what I'm getting at there. As an INFP, I feel like what she did is she drew in very deeply so she could understand her own reflection of the human condition. And that became her muse. She had a really unfaltering, unwavering access to something very rich and very truthful in her relative experience. And the way she managed to express that into an art form was just beautiful, is just beautiful. So let's talk a bit about muse. What do I mean by a muse there? Traditionally, in the artistic sense, the muse is your source of inspiration. If you're an artist, or if you have an artist who has their muse, you could imagine it as like the external, the theme, the thing where the artist is drawing that light. It's like the medium between the quality that the artist is attempting to access and themselves, right? So the muse is that sort of gateway, it's that bridge, and they're drawing inspiration from that muse. And different artists and different people just in general in life are going to have different muses, right? And an artistic muse doesn't always have to be like someone you're in love with or an emotional theme or something like that. It could be, you could be an architect or an engineer, for example, and your muse could just be construction, and you might not relate to it at a very deep, heartfelt level. You just have this sense that this is your calling, this is the thing that you love the most and that you're really drawn into. But as an INFP, someone whose most dominant feature is their introverted feeling, their granular, specific sense of being able to draw into their human condition. As we begin to understand this more, we start to come in contact with themes in ourselves that are very deep and very intimate, and they start to border past just the things that we're going through in our personality, and they start to border into these unconscious elements that when you go that deep in yourself, that's a reflection of an aspect of humanity, right? Sadness is not like a personal possession, right? Existential loneliness is not some personal possession that a person has. Existential sadness or loneliness or beauty, these are human themes. They're themes that belong to the domain of humanity. But if you're going that deep in yourself, like an INFP often is going to be in one way, shape, or form, you start to pick up on these themes for humanity, or that humanity possesses as a whole, right? It extends beyond just your personal self. A lot of where INFPs can struggle, I notice, is that as the emotional spectrum begins to deepen throughout life, you can check out the video I released recently about going from your teen years into your 20s as an INFP. I said in that video how our bubble tends to go from being quite compressed and quite personal to having to expand out to integrate us into the world. And that can be really difficult a lot of the time. It can be a difficult part for us growing up. But the gain of that is the emotional depth that we garner from having more of this experience and seeing more, feeling more, understanding more. It's like, as an INFP, we start to have a really in-depth sense of the human condition. And what's really amazing is that each of us are going to relate and understand different specific domains. We're going to relate to different domains or qualities of the human condition. That's really at the heart of it what an INFP is, right? An INFP differs from an INFJ, where an INFJ is more attuned to the themes of how things come together with their introverted intuition. They're noticing the pattern recognition of the mind and how it might work. You can think of someone like Carl Jung understanding how systems work for an individual and then building his idea of there being a persona, ego, and then an unconscious and a collective unconscious. It's more like the system, where the way I would differentiate an INFP and an INFJ in that sense is an INFP is someone who's more attuned to the uniquely human experience. The introverted feeling is more of the sense or the felt experience of the human domain rather than the system through which it exists. So as this emotional understanding and this emotional depth, or this existential understanding and existential depth deepens, we really start to have more of a sense of what humanity is all about at the felt level. Not at the level of what works in the state of affairs of day-to-day life and how this operates, this domain of government works. Or, I mean, that could be the case for an INFP. They could get involved in these things. But most INFPs I've come across, and just in myself as well, we tend to be more like we're interested in the character aspect of things. And when we start to get in touch with these feelings in ourselves, it can be very confronting because we're going very, very deep. We're going very, very deep into a certain feeling state, into these states of consciousness. And it can often be very difficult to translate these things out. It can be difficult to use our common parlance to explain how we're feeling when we have such a expansive breadth of feeling, right? It's not just like, I'm feeling sad. It's like, it's a kind of sadness, but it's related more to melancholy. And part of it's like a nostalgia, which we probably recognize as like an aspect that we draw into when the conditions are right. But then another part of it is maybe like an anxiety of not really quite knowing where life's going to go. And then mixed with that, blended with that palette, there's a sense of enjoyment of actually exploring the emotion anyway. And that provides kind of like a lightness to the feeling. And that's just off the top of my head, but I think that's a good way of explaining if an INFP was really being open with you. Their feelings and their emotions, these states of consciousness, there's a certain kind of texture that we bring to the table, a specificity, and there's a richness in that. And communicating that, like I said, with our common parlance, is really, really difficult. No matter how loquacious we become, no matter how good our vocabulary becomes, how many books we read, it's difficult to translate this because it's not just about the words. It's really not just about what the words are pointing to, but it's about this deep felt, deeply textured, how many times am I going to say deep? But it is deep. It's this deeply textured sense of a feeling or a state or emotion, right? And when you can't express that out a lot of the time, what starts to happen is there can be this sense of feeling quite isolated or quite frustrated. And in the worst case scenarios, feeling like something might be wrong with you. And that's why I think it's so important for INFPs to develop a sense of having a muse, right? Not just this sense of like, okay, when I'm done with work and I'm done being with my partner, I have like an hour where I read my book and go to this place in myself, like it's some isolated, fragmented feature of our life. But what is the thing that you most deeply attune to at the level of your heart? What is the thing that's most true in your scope of relative truth for you as a human? What is it that you really attune to the most deeply? Is what I would ask you. I think that's the kind of question that starts to draw you towards your values and like what your muse might be. And this is a pattern that this is where it can be good to have an INFJ on your team. It's like noticing that pattern in you and seeing over your life how you've probably been drawn to one area or a certain set of feelings in that way. And what we often don't get told, what is often never communicated to us is how important that can be. Actually, a lot of the time when we try to express our innermost self, we get kind of like shooed away. And I've noticed there's a sense of like, oh, great, but I don't understand what you mean, or people don't really want to go there because it kind of has this, I think they can feel how steep that can be. Or even if it's a positive emotion, how elevated it can be. It's so outside of the usual range of emotions that are in our social domain that when we try to bring that forth, it's often at best misinterpreted, and at worst, it's maybe people will try to shun it. So what no one ever tells us is that actually, when you're coming more in contact with these themes through your own experience, there's something magnificent in that, and this is the kind of thing that has the capacity to change the world in its own way. We need poets. There is a certain domain of life where it's almost like I'm doing like an Uncle Sam recruiting for INFPs right now, but we need you, right? The world needs your depth of understanding and depth of feeling. It can't all just be about practical day-to-day stuff and what's going to happen here or there, or how this relationship's over there, so-and-so's doing this, or what am I going to do for work? Or there's a sanctity for the domain of life where we're really burrowing into the depths of the human experience. And when you have that alignment and that attunement, and you know what you're doing, and you're creating something because you love to create it. I'll talk a bit about the process of that in a minute here, in the next point. That illuminates you. That brings you to life. That's the whole reason I'm making this video right here. There's so many things like this that I'm going to be thinking about, I'm going to be contemplating. And yeah, I have my job and my relationships and my stuff, but this is at the heart of what I care about the most, and this is why I'm saying it to you. This is my version of that. My muse is trying to bring this information out there in my own way. So whatever that is for you, just for now, just for this moment, I want you to take a moment to just see if there's something like that you can notice right away, and if not, that's fine. But if you can register that there's something like a theme in your life that you connect to really richly like that, I want you to just check in with yourself. This is just a starting point to see if do you give that the time and the space and the recognition or the importance that it deserves? Don't be surprised if the answer is no. Maybe you don't really give that the space and the time and the recognition it deserves. But when we start doing this, I'll talk about the process in a minute, but when we start doing this, something really incredible there can be that we start to notice that there's a difference in how we carry ourselves as well, how we hold ourselves, and more importantly, how we situate our life. We start to put this heart calling at the front step of our life. It's the thing that we lead with. It's our best foot that we put forward. And in a world like this, that's so superficial most of the time, so blind, so misguided, so devoid, just the current state of the world is so devoid of beauty and depth and humanity in a lot of ways, that we need this. So if you can register any of that in yourself, just give yourself a moment to look into that. If this is something that you don't really, you kind of get maybe some of a sense of it, but you're not really sure exactly about where that is in you and you want help with it, I'll leave my email down below. This is the exact kind of thing that I offer coaching for, but that's not necessary, right? You can figure this out by yourself. You can sit down with one of these, with a journal, pen and paper, and you can investigate this in yourself, right? Go into this, actually see what is that heart calling, what is that theme that moves you. This is all the kind of questioning and the kind of space that we want to get you more in touch with your muse. So let's talk a bit about the process. What is the process here that allows an INFP to take their connection with that muse and start making it the front piece of your life, the central piece of your life? In order to explain this, I want to give an analogy. This just popped into my head when I was thinking about this morning. I want to give the analogy of a flower. If you can imagine that originally a flower goes from seedling, it's like non-existence, into like this seedling, it sort of sprouts up into a stem, and then there's the bud. And then if the bud survives, eventually with the right conditions, the right kind of nutrients in the soil, the surrounding environment, the right wind patterns, the right amount of photosynthesis through sunlight, the right amount of water through rain, if everything's right, the flower can bloom out. And there's this universal force that moves through. It's like the flower obviously doesn't have a conscious sense of self, so it relies on that underlying force in the universe, the same force that allows color to exist or that allows our hearts to beat right now. We're not thinking about making that happen. There's just something that moves that through. It's the same thing that allows the flower to blossom and actualize into its total form. But also notice, it's not really when the flower actualizes into its total form, it's if. A lot of flowers will never, because the conditions might not be right. There might be too little sunlight for that flower to blossom, or too much. Right? There might be too little water from rain, or there might be too much and it might get drowned out. The wind might be too strong. There might be some kid might rip it up or something like that. The soil might not have the nutrients. You see where I'm coming from with this? This flower might never actually blossom into its full form. And in order for it to do so, it requires the right conditions around it. Unlike the flower, though, that has really no say or control there, that's where, as a human being, we do. And that's why I was saying that thing before about, do we give the time, the space, the attention, the recognition, the validation, the permission? Do we have that for our own muse? Right? That's a really important question to be asking. Do I have the right amount of love, essentially? Because that's what we're talking about as a quality. Being able to give yourself permission to follow your heart's calling is an act of love, and it's something that should be engendered into us as children, but it is often not. Our culture, our family, our peer groups often don't engender that to us, and that is because as INFPs we are quite a rare type, and most people are usually more concerned with state of affairs rather than state of consciousness. And that's not to say that's wrong, but it is to say that if your personality disposition is such that you have more of a calling to the poetry of life, or to that depth in life, or exploring the human condition, which most INFPs do, that's why most INFPs end up as for me, I'm a counselor in my work. I like making these videos and creating these things. I enjoy character study. I know other INFPs who are counselors as well. I know another INFP who went into psychology. I know another one who's in business, but it's a person-oriented business, about finding your passion. And a lot of INFPs are going to be drawn towards this, right? Or they might do something different in their everyday life, but they might have their own sort of double agent private life where they're drawing into more aspects of psychology and the human condition like that. And so as far as that process goes, it's important to know the importance of it. That's the point of this video. It's meant to provide a sense of permission from the outside. And permission starts with recognition, right? It starts with acknowledging the thing that we're looking to permit. And then by doing that, we can then start building our life more around these principles. You know, we don't feel bad for taking that 2 hours when, have you ever heard that term JOMO? I recently heard that. So FOMO is like the fear of missing out. And JOMO is this idea of the joy of missing out. So we don't feel bad when we take that 2 hours instead of going out and doing this with our friends. Maybe right now we just need to tune into our values and our purpose more. We need more time to follow what moves us. Yeah, we have a day off, and yeah, there are sure some other things that we need to do, and it's important to be responsible as an adult and get things done. But right now we need to go follow this photography thing, or we need to go to that painting class, or we need to go to that meditation group. That's the thing that's calling us. And I think that we begin to shine so much more brightly when we take the time and the space that we need to permit the right conditions into our life. It's not about building the right conditions, but it's about building a sense of self and routine that permits those conditions to shine through. We might need more time for ourselves. We might need more time with others. But it's looking at ourselves and thinking, am I in touch with my purpose? Am I in touch with my calling? Do I know what that is? Like I said, if that's something that you feel like you need help with, reach out to me via email below and we can have a one-on-one about that. But the idea is this sense of, am I in touch with that? This isn't something you can ever really get the answer from outside. It's something that you need to direct your attention inward for and start looking at, how am I actually able to come in contact with this in myself now? Is this something that I've not felt contact with for a long time? Or maybe I'm living my calling right now, but I feel lonely in it and I don't know how to express it. Is my muse, like, am I able to put that into something like we said with Ichiko Aoba with music? Or like Nathan with his weird YouTube videos? Or am I able to paint that? Does it come out in conversation or in dialogue? How much of that dialogue do I get in my life? Again, it's not about how can I then take that and make a career out of it. It's just making sure that the central piece in your life is the thing that moves you. Because if you're someone who has a really, really deep broad emotional spectrum, and you're someone who is naturally more resonant with the poetic aspects of life, the human domain, then this really does have to be the front foot of your life. You're never probably going to be satisfied with the humdrum and the everyday thing. You want something that's more rich. You want something that has more of a heartbeat. So the process of that is sitting down, oftentimes. Sometimes it can be a bit arduous. Just sitting down, and I find it quite fun, just to ask the questions like, what moves me the most? And how much of my life is situated towards that? And if it's not, am I able to make the necessary sacrifices to attune my life to what I care about the most, what I'm most passionate about? When we get more in touch with this and the process starts working and that flower starts to bloom, this becomes about what I call hearing yourself. Hearing yourself is different from listening to yourself. I say that to people sometimes. In general, if I'm working with someone, I'll say, do you feel like people hear you? It's different to, do you feel like people listen to you? Unfortunately, some people don't have both, but anyone can listen, right? Listening is just being receptive and not talking over someone else, and anyone can listen to themselves. Like if I want to have a sushi for dinner tonight, which I probably will, that's just something that's come up in me, and I can listen to that. I can register that, right? But hearing myself in that silly example might be, why is it that I actually feel like that? What is the texture of that? Why am I attracted to that experience? What is it that's come together to make me feel that way, to want sushi for dinner? It's probably not the best example, but you get what I mean. Listening to yourself is just hearing what's coming up and just registering. Hearing is sort of moving into and inquiring and becoming intimate and becoming close with what comes up. So that's the second aspect of the process. The writing down and the organizing your thoughts and the putting the time into that so you can shine more brightly is a huge part of it. But another aspect, I think, is just learning how to hear yourself, learning how to listen to your own inner voice and go deeper than just registration and understanding, and allowing that to permeate through your being, allowing that to come out when you talk to people, allowing that to come out when you create something, allowing that to come out when you have a few hours and you're opting the JOMO option and you're just spending time with yourself, turning in and finding what your innermost truth is, right? So actually hearing yourself. And the simple question there is, do I feel like I can actually hear myself? Because sometimes, although we might be listening at some level, although a lot might be coming up, we have to put things aside just to get stuff done, and that's all important. But at what point am I going to start hearing myself? At what point am I going to start aligning my life to my purpose and what I care about the most? I think that with all these things, we can start to shine brighter than we ever imagined. It's important for me to say this to you because I think sometimes INFPs, like that flower, we just don't quite fully open up a lot of the time because there's so many differing life situations. There's so many of these feelings and emotions that we're going through in ourselves. There's so many varying states of development, addictions and, drama and this thing over here. And then, now I've got to work 5 days a week doing something I don't really care about. There's so many of these different factors from the conditions in life that we don't often actually get the time to sink in and make sense of who we are. And that starts with recognizing the importance of that. If no one had ever done that, we wouldn't have some of the best works of literature that we do, or the music that we do, like the music of Ichiko Aoba. We wouldn't have these weird YouTube videos if I decided I was just going to do practical stuff, because I'm neck deep in practical stuff that I need to do right now in my life, But I make time for this because I understand the value of it. Even if one person saw this video, if I could reach one person from it, I understand the value in that. Right? So it's being able to hear yourself. And with all that, this wasn't meant to be a clickbait video of like, INFPs could be great if they just knew this one secret. It's actually the one thing, and the one thing is, starting from the beginning, let's just do a quick summary. Finding your muse, finding your innermost truth, situating your life so that can move through smoothly, committing yourself and giving yourself permission for what you love, what you care about, and learning to hear yourself if you're going off course. Or if this might... Yep, I knew that was going to happen. The video always cuts off in a half an hour period with this camera, but I ended there on the summary, so that would have been the ending. Thank you very much for tuning in and subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, I appreciate that. Liking the video, sharing this to anyone you feel like would get value out of it, but particularly if they're an INFP, or if you're an INFP and you need someone to hear some of this stuff. My email's down below for any coaching, counseling kind of stuff. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.